Ryan Poles.
Yeah.
How about that transition?
Nice job.
Thank you.
He's in the position.
He said
Mr. Pfizer.
he wants to do right by Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Did he?
Yes. He traded him to a place where he can compete for a starting job with an offensive coordinator that likes quarterbacks who can run and move, and with an incredibly solid, stable franchise that is desperately looking for a quarterback identity, and a head coach in Mike Tomlin who has been on the record as being a fan of Justin Fields. That's a really good place for Justin to try and have the next chapter of his career. He's not going into this as a full-on anointed backup from the get-go against a well-established starter or who's someone who's making a lot of money. It's a good opportunity for Justin Fields.
I agree completely. Courtney Cronin said that there was an offer that had more out there that Ryan Poles did not take.
Brad Biggs this morning called that idea malarkey.
Yes.
Flat out malarkey. Not Mike. I believe he said hogwash as well. Called it hogwash and malarkey.
Well, Ian Rappaport said, important note on the Justin Fields trade, at least 4 additional teams inquired about trading for Fields, but Fields' representation asked for him not to be traded there. He wanted the Steelers, and the Bears did right by him. So Ian Rappaport and Courtney Cronin are very credible. Brad Biggs is very credible. I actually think this is one of those situations where both sides could be right. And I know that seems hard to imagine.
Well, because what Biggs was saying was that malarkey was that there was an offer for better draft capital.
Right.
Because that's what Cronin said. That's what Courtney said.
Right. But I think it's possible that there is, like what you were talking about, like a pick this year is better than a pick next year, right? Because you know where the pick is. Whereas next year, it could be higher in the round. It could be later in the round. It's harder to predict. And executives would rather have picks currently because it helps them keep their jobs. Not that Ryan Poles has any issue with job security. But like, let's say the Kenny Pickett trade, a 4th-round pick. Is it possible that Philly was one of those teams? And Justin Fields' camp was like, we don't want to go to Philly. We can't start in Philly. Jalen Hurts has a $250 million deal. And he does have a shot to start in Pittsburgh, and if he plays more than half the games, that also ends up being a 4th-round pick. So to Brad Biggs' point, 4th-round pick v. 4th-round pick, malarkey. That's not better draft capital. But to Ian Rappaport and Courtney Cronin's point, it is doing right by the Bears and other teams who are interested. Yeah, like, because to be clear, I do not think it's feasible or defensible if a 2nd-round pick was available for Justin Fields and Ryan Poles turned it down to do right by him. That's not his primary responsibility. It's a nice little ancillary benefit, doing a favor for an agent, do a favor for a player, be player friendly, listen to their request, tiebreaker, go to them. But if there was significantly better draft capital available for another team, and because of favoritism or preference or whatever, he wouldn't be doing his job.
No, I agree if it was like a massive differential in draft capital. But if it was even just a slight differential, if it was a 5 this year or a 5 next year, and I don't know that Brad is 100%. Let's posit that they're both sort of correct, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm cool with Ryan Poles taking a little bit less, if it's just a little, to do right by Justin Fields because of the uniqueness of the situation. The favor for the agent is one thing, but how about the entire league, which has been so vocal, and all these players who have been so vocal, and there is an admission here of, over the course of 3 years, it being rough on Justin in a league that doesn't, like Kyle Long said to us, doesn't do right by many people. So if you're engendering some goodwill for future free agents, for the way that people talk about you around the league, that Justin is happy to get to go to Pittsburgh where he's got a shot, is that worth the difference from a 5 to a 6? I'm okay with that. As a Bears fan, if Ryan Poles took a little less to give Justin a good opportunity and that word got around the league, I'm okay with that.
And he's got a super agent.
Yep.
This isn't a non-represented player. This isn't a guy. This isn't Chris Jones, who has an agent. He's his agent's only client.
Sure.
This is one of the 2 or 3 most powerful agents in the NFL.
Hey, man, that stuff can matter in pro sports. The obvious and extreme example is the Bulls never recovering from the entire league thinking that they screwed over Michael Jordan. That's an extreme example.
Yeah.
But, those reputations do exist, and they can matter.
I don't think that there's a world that exists that they turned down significantly more draft compensation. And 5th, 6th, 7th round picks in the era of NIL are going to be less and less valuable because underclassmen are staying in college. Why would I go into the NFL early for a non-guaranteed contract when I'm going to be a day 3 pick, when I could come back to college, have some guaranteed money in the form of NIL, graduate, be a big man on campus, and make few $100,000, whatever it is, depending on the player and the university, and hopefully have a great senior season, and then be a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick in future drafts. So the belief is that the late-round picks, the end of drafts, are going to be worse and worse in the era of NIL because the borderline guys are willing to stay. So the difference between a 5th and a 6th-round pick, they're both just blind dart throws at this point.
So that lends even more.
That's what I'm saying.
Credence to that.
To giving up a little bit less.
Get a little bit less. So, but I do think and that's why it's, there's people out there saying that Poles screwed over Fields on the way out the door. You can't look at this in terms of the spot that he's going to and think he screwed over Justin Fields. He sent him to a really good spot to try and reclaim or restart a career.
I agree. The question of how they handled it since he's been here is a little bit more complicated.
Oh, I think it's a lot more complicated because it gets into to start with, it gets beyond Ryan Poles, gets to the first year where, as well documented, Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, how did they do that year?
Oh, well, terribly, obviously. But I actually am just interested in the 2nd and the 3rd because, the first year, man, he was drafted by a regime that got fired.
Yeah.
That sucks, and that is not his fault. They should have never been allowed to do it. We talked about it at the time, how rare it was that the same GM could trade up for a 1st-round quarterback, have it be a bust, be given the opportunity to do it again.
Sure, and those guys...
We couldn't find comps.
And those guys were desperate. Dan Reeves, I think, was the one we found, but even that doesn't really fly. Those guys were desperate to prove their worth and prove their jobs, and that got in the way of their entire plan that year.
So Nagy and Pace definitely didn't do right by Justin.
Did Poles?
Poles, in Justin year 2, year 1 of Poles.
Yeah, you talk about that year.
Justin Fields, and this is not great, but my guess is he wasn't a top 3 priority in Ryan Poles' mind. He's a quarterback he inherited. He had a ton of job security because he was the new guy on the job. And he looked at that roster and he said, I could have Joe Montana and I'm not winning.
I have to gut this thing. I have to change over this mess I've been left with.
I got to get rid of Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman and Khalil Mack, and I got to get younger, and I need to recoup draft capital, and I need to be bad by design and make it as painful as possible right now because I don't have forever. So I need to get to a clean slate as soon as possible. So his 2nd year in the league, there was nothing around him.
Yeah, and the whole thing, and he was losing pieces as the weeks went on. The whole thing was in decay. Year 2 was horrendous luck in terms of timing and regime change. And no, Poles did not make Fields a priority in that year.
No. The only thing he did for him was trade for Claypool. And obviously that went horribly. He was trying to do something for him, but that was the only thing even the draft, the first 2 picks are defensive players. You know what I mean? I'm going nuts on the air about the Brisker pick, because I'm like, what are you doing? You got to figure out if Fields is the guy.
Yep.
So year 2, Justin was how it read based on actions was mostly an afterthought. Hey man,
a tank win quarterback.
You're but
go ahead and be a magician.
Go be a magician, and he was.
Mm-hmm.
And then year three
is interesting.
First round pick tackle, DJ Moore in the trade, and sign Nate Davis, right? So big free agent investment in guard, big draft investment at right tackle. The Braxton Jones pick is working at this point, so left tackle. Find a home for Tevin Jenkins. 4 of 5 offensive line positions are solidified for him last year. He has a legitimate number 1 receiver, and the defense is good. And it's continuity of system. That was a fair shake for Justin last year.
Well, we have to look at what the game plan was going into the year. And you yourself called it coaching malpractice.
Yep.
And a lot of people were freaked out by what Getty was doing and what Getty was asking Fields to do. And I really believe that there's no way Getty asks Fields to do this as an entire offseason program, and there's the play calling in the first 2 weeks. There's no way that happens without Ryan Poles knowing that's exactly what they're doing. There's no way that happens. So it's Poles' plan with Getty as somebody who works for him to try and find out if Justin Fields can make the leap. They go to George McCaskey and say, George, we're going to keep Justin. Remember, he made the big pronouncement. Justin deserves this chance, deserves this year. But they also want to find out if he can be the kind of pocket quarterback they need to.
Right.
So I challenge you on it. How you felt about it in those first 2-3 weeks when they were force-feeding him to be a pocket passer. Is that the right thing to do for the slow, perhaps gradual development of Justin Fields, playing to his strengths? I think not necessarily, but is it the right thing to do as a team builder, as a ruthless team builder, trying to figure out if a guy can make the leap when you have 2 first-round picks? Because of the trade you made, you have 2 ones. They may end up 5-9. They may end up 6-12. By the luck of Panthers chaos, they end up 1-9. It ends up 1, which is insane. But I fully believe the plan was, as a team builder, let's find out quickly if Justin can be that guy. Was it fair to him what they asked of him schematically in the offseason and in weeks 1 and 2?
I think it was dumb. More so than like fair or unfair. Because if you were truly open to the possibility that Fields would be the guy, there should never have been a reason to go from, say, 2 years ago was, 80-10, 80-20 athleticism to pocket timing passing to go to
80-20 pocket to
like 0-100 the other way. We were like, where are the designed runs? Why aren't they moving the pocket? Mm-hmm. What's going on here? Like, I just thought it was if you think that you maybe have Lamar, it was an insane thing to do. It was not it was Matt Nagy Hungarian stubbornness.
Sure, but what if they don't want to have a Lamar and build around a Lamar Jackson, and they don't believe that's the quarterback profile that wins in the NFL?
Well, I mean, then they probably should have traded him a year earlier and drafted C.J. Stroud. They had the number 1 pick.
They did have the number 1 pick.
so,
but they didn't know for sure about C.J. Stroud, I guess. I don't know. I think it was a ruthless plan to try and figure out, because if he does make the leap, great, and if not, then they've got the opportunity for a little bit of a soft double tank, which we talked about plenty.
Yeah.
And I think that
I just think that is a huge risk. Because Carolina had 5 games where they lost by 3 points. If they win 3 of the 5 and you don't have a path to drafting the next quarterback, or you're stuck taking the 4th quarterback prospect, I don't believe that they sabotaged Justin Fields this year.
I don't think they sabotaged him either. And I think the first part of the year is one factor, like we're talking about, and the second part of the year is those last 7 games when he did, without a doubt, have a fair chance to show them what he had.
Yeah, and he wasn't good enough.
He wasn't good enough. He had a number 1 wideout. He had an offensive line that was established. The running game was fine. The defense was balling out. He had chances to do everything he needed to do to show them, and it wasn't good enough. And that was indeed a fair chance.
So overall, if you only had 7 games of it being a good situation and a fair chance, in 3 years, that's obviously not great, but life ain't fair, man.
And
Life ain't fair.
they also have how he reacted to what they did in the offseason and those first 2 games. And he didn't react well. He slowed down, and he had a little bit of panic and a little bit of gun shyness in the pocket. And that matters, how he reacted to it. Even if it was slightly unfair as a plan, how he reacts to it matters.
All right, Shane thinks we should take this call right here, and then we will continue getting some more reaction to the craziness of the end of the Justin Fields era ends with a whimper of a future 6th-round pick.